Hello and welcome back to my channel. We are here for my August wrap-up and I'm so excited. I did so much reading this month. So first, some statistics. This month, I read a total of 5 graphic novels and 11 novels for a total of 16 books. Whoa, so many. In pages, that is 5,455. Like, just astronomical this month. I don't know how I read so much. And my average rating this month was 4.25. This is a new thing I'm doing, the average rating. I think it's going to be interesting to see over time how that changes. So I'm actually going to go back to all my other monthly wrap-ups and put that down in the description box. So if you're interested, you can find out there. And at the end of the year, I'm going to have graphs and charts, and it's going to be so much fun for me and hopefully for you. So the first book that I read this month was the July pick for the End of the World Book Club, which was The Fallen Children by David Owen. If you have watched my other reviews, you will have known that I did not like this book. I did not like it at all. But that's okay, because other people do like it, and it does have some values, but I did have some very big issues with it. Mostly involving the way that the girls in this book took being pregnant and how they kind of cognized it and how no one really realized that they were getting very pregnant very quickly. Like, they had a very accelerated pregnancy. They went from nothing to 9 months in around 2 weeks. And no one thought that that was strange or tried to help them. But it did have some really great commentary on poverty and other things like that, so, you know. But for the reading experience, I only gave it 2 stars. I wouldn't say that it's worth picking up, but there you are. It's kind of cool though. They published it in 360 colors. I got a green cover, and it is color 335. So, the more you know. The next book I read was a long time coming. I have had this book sitting on my shelf probably since shortly after it was published, which was in 2007. So I've probably had it on my shelf since 2008, which is almost 10 years. And that is Confessor by Terry Goodkind. I have been a huge fan of the Sword of Truth series. I watched all of The Legend of the Seeker, and I own it on DVD. And for some reason, after I read the book before this, which is Phantom, I needed a break. I was done. And I took a break, and I just did not read this book, which is a shame, because this was a lovely book, and I really enjoyed it. It brought back all the memories of high school. I'm still in love with Richard and Kaelin and Zed and Kara. I think they're all great characters. The plot was really interesting. A lot of really cool things happened. It talks about revolution, and the ending had such a twist. It blew my mind. So, I loved this book as much as I loved all the other books, and I rated it 5 stars. Fantastic. The next book I read was a little bit of a disappointment, and that was Uprooted by Naomi Novik. So this is like a fairy tale and fantasy mixed together. It's often been called a crossover between YA and adult fantasy. So I was super excited for this book. I thought it looked really cool, it sounded really cool, and it just didn't do it for me. There was some plot things that I was like, I wish that we did something different here, and the writing wasn't as good as Naomi Novik's other books. You don't know this because I haven't blogged about it at all or done any reviews, but I also read her series His Majesty's Dragon, which is fantastic, and I love it a lot, so I was expecting a lot from this book, and it just didn't get there. So I only rated it a 3 out of 5. It was a pretty fun read, but it wasn't a book that was like calling me to continue reading it, like, don't put me down, I need to be finished. So, which is what I was expecting from it, because it's how I felt about her other books. So yeah, it was okay, but not great. Next, for my 24-hour readathon, I started and finished Kafka on the Shore by Haruki Murakami. And it was a pretty decent book. I liked it a lot. It wasn't a good book for a 24-hour readathon. It was quite big, so I felt like I wasn't being very productive when I was reading it. And it's a book that you had to pay like a lot of attention to. All of the words had meaning, so you couldn't just like blaze through it. I rated it a 3 out of 5. It has some good representation in it, and the story's good, but I found parts of it just a little bit too weird and too disturbing, and I didn't like it. I wasn't into it, so 3 out of 5. The next book I read, I started during my 24-hour readathon, and that is Hild by Nicola Griffith. This is a story about a 16th century saint in Britain named Hilde of Whoopi. So it's really cool. It has this really nice lady knight on the cover who is Hild, and I was super excited for this. I bought this probably close to when it first came out, to be honest with you. I do this a lot with books. I buy them when they first come out, and I'm like, oh yes, I'm going to read this, and then I never do. I was just going to try and find a publication date for you. 2013. So it's like not as bad, but still. This one, like, I didn't get super into at first. When I first started sitting and reading it more, it was easier, but I was so burnt out for my 24-hour readathon that I just didn't read until I went camping, which wasn't that far away, but it was still like, I had planned on finishing this before I left. I rated it 4 stars. The writing in it's really good. Stylistically, I didn't like everything that happened, and I found that Hild's voice did not reflect the fact that she was a child, even though it's not being told in like a reflective way. So yeah, I kind of messed up already. Like, I was supposed to go through some graphic novels that I read in between, so we're just gonna separate them. So, not chronological order. The next book I read was one that I have been waiting to read for years, and that is The Eye of the World by Robert Jordan. For those of you who are unfamiliar with this book, it is the first book in the Wheel of Time, probably one of the best fantasy series that is in existence. I borrowed the whole entire series from my dad the day before we left for camping. He called me downstairs, and he was just standing there like this, with the whole entire series, all 15 books. And it was a struggle to get it back to my room. I was not tall enough for that. I don't have the same arm span as my dad, so when he gave them to me, it was not like 100% fun. But I loved this book. It was really fun. I read it while I was camping, so my dad was there too. He's read this book 4 or 5 times, so we got to talk about it quite a bit. We read passages from it, and he wouldn't tell me if someone was dead or not. So he was a good friend. And I rated this book a 5 stars. I loved it. It was great. If you're looking for a high fantasy epic, this is the book for you. If you're not, this is still the book for you. It was fantastic. I loved it so much. The Eye of the World. The next book that I read, I started while I was camping, but did not finish there, and that is Reaper Man by Terry Pratchett. I love reading Terry Pratchett when I'm traveling. He's just such a fun author to read. Always great insights into life and death and all this sort of thing. And this was no exception. It was super funny. It was about death, so of course there's a lot of things about death, anxiety around death, and what it means to live. So that was really great. And I rated it 4 stars. I thought it was delightful. And it's definitely going to be one of the favorites in this series that I've read so far. This is the 11th book in the Discworld series and 2nd book in the Death series. So if you're wondering where it fits in. But if you haven't read Discworld, you should definitely check it out because it's a lot of fun. The next book I read, we're getting towards the end, was All Quiet on the Western Front by Enrich. Did not pronounce that right, I'm just going to keep on moving on. So this is, as the little plate here says, the greatest war novel of all time. It's about Germans during World War I. They are all 18 to 20, and they are on the front. And it's talking about a lot about what war means to them, why it's hard for them because they are children, and what that means in the sense of them growing up, and what it means in the context of the broken generation. So I love this book. I blazed through it. I thought that it was concise. I thought it was really like hard-hitting, heart-wrenching, like everything you expect from a novel about World War I. I read some biographies, and I will say that a lot of people don't want to read books about Germans because they feel like it's going to be too political, I guess, but like, it does not matter what side of the war you're on for this novel. The testimony in this is no different than things that I've read from the Allied side. Everybody has the same feelings, and it's really a good read. If I could send it to all of you, I would, but I don't have that sort of money. I rated it 5 stars, and I think you all should read this book. It was great. The next book I read was another sort of period one. It was the first volume of Jennifer Worth's biography called the Midwife. It was also published under the title The Midwife until the show came out, when they changed it and changed the cover to match the PBS show. I have been watching this show since it started airing on PBS, and I love it. Me and my mom watch it together. She's a nurse that works in the neonatal intensive care, so she likes babies, and I like spending time with my mom in period dramas. So here we are. This read very much like the show. There are some expansions on things, which is really nice, and it's really interesting hearing Jennifer Worth's voice. A lot of the time she's criticizing herself in the way that she behaved, which I think is really interesting. This was her first time encountering poverty and things like that in the East End of London, so it was quite a big shift for her. So that was really interesting in how she dealt with that, and at first, like, there was things that really put her off and disgusted her until she got to know people better and look at why their living conditions were the way they were. So she spends a lot of the book talking about, it's like, I was young. I didn't know better when I had these thoughts, but I recognized that they were wrong. So I think that's really good. It's a really powerful book about life, too, so it's really life-affirming. It was a good book to read after, All Quiet on the Western Front. And I rated this also 5 stars. I thought it was excellent. I really enjoyed it, and I'm really looking forward to reading the second part of her memoir. The next book I read is another book that has been sitting on my shelf for 10 years, and that is Sabriel by Garth Nix. I don't know why it has taken me so long to read this book, but here we are, and I loved this book. I loved it so much. I thought it was fantastic. I could not put it down. I just flew through it. In fact, now I have finished the whole entire series, and I read them back to back, and I have not read series back to back in years. It's just, it was incredible. It was a life-changing experience. So this book is about necromancers, and that's really cool, and they have magic, and they're trying to bind the dead, and a whole bunch of things happen. There's a big bad. It's an epic fantasy. It's great. I loved it. It's YA too, and the font is so big. So big. So it was super quick to read. I rated this also 5 stars because I was just blown away by this book. I thought it was fantastic. I cannot say enough good things about this book. So yes, Sabriel by Garth Nix. And here we are at the final book that I have read during the month of August. And that was If You Wish by Cassandra Sage Briskman. I think I pronounced that wrong yesterday in my review, and I do apologize. I've only ever seen her name before this book in her Instagram thing, and I don't read the middle of words sometimes, so many apologies. But me and her are mutual Instagram followers, so I decided to read her book, and it was pretty good. It was written when she was a teenager. I don't know if she's still a teenager or not, but anyways, it was written while she was a teenager, and that's the important part of the whole entire spiel that I have. So I found the voice to be at times quite young, which is to be expected, but it was also not ideal. And I think she has a lot of room to grow as an author, which is why I only rated 3 stars. But otherwise, as a retelling of Cinderella, I think she does a lot of really cool things in it. This follows Ella, and her dad is a famous director and her mother dies when she's like 4. And then her father remarries, and everything goes to shit, because it's Cinderella. But it was really cool. It was a good take on the story, and I really enjoyed this book. So those were the 11 books that I read this month. On to the 5 graphic novels. So the first one that we're going to talk about is, of course, Paper Girls Volume 2. I read this at the same time that I read The Fallen Children, and I loved it. I thought it was fantastic. I rated it 5 stars. I liked it better than the first volume. It answered a lot of questions and kind of got more into the mythology of the world and what's going on at the heart of it. You meet one of the characters as an adult, which I think is really cool. And none of this is spoilers because it also happens at the end of the last volume. But if you haven't read the 3rd volume, you should stop watching soon because I will be getting to the 3rd volume soon because I also read that this month. But yes, Paper Girls. I love this series. I think it's so much fun. Brian K. Vaughan does a great job at writing it, and I am so impressed. The next one I read in the car on the way to our camping in PEI, and that was Lumberjanes Volume 1, which is called Beware of the Kitten Holy. I was pleasantly surprised by this. It is a middle grade graphic novel. This is a preview of the art there for you. And it's a lot of fun. It's super fantastic. It's about these spunky group of misfit girls that are at this camp, and they're kind of like surviving and solving mysteries. It's a lot of fun. I've also read Volume 2 now, so that will be coming up for you next month. But I rated this 5 out of 5. I think it was a perfect book to read before I went camping, and I loved it. The next graphic novel that I read was Audubon, On the Wings of the World by Fabien Grolleau. This one is really fun. It was about Audubon, so there's some art there, who was an ornithologist in America. So he is the one that made Birds of America, which is probably the most well-known and best birding book. I don't know whether you care about birds or not, but I like birds. I'm terrible at identifying them, but I really enjoyed this. At the beginning they have a warning about language used in it because it's about the 19th century, so they use 19th century language, and I was expecting it to be a lot worse than it was, but it is something that a lot of people criticize the book for, so just keep that in mind. But the art in it's fantastic. It also includes some of his art at the back. I've shown this picture so many times now, so, oh, there he is. Look at him, how handsome. And there are 2 of his pictures. It's really interesting because he was an artist as well as a scientist, but at the time in America, they thought that drawings for books and things like that should be completely scientific and not artful. And that's why they didn't like him. He actually didn't get his book published until he went to England and showed them his paintings, and they were like, why isn't this a book already? This is fantastic. It's so great. So, follow your dreams, people. That's the moral of this one. He also had a really supportive wife that raised his children all by herself while he was tramping around in the wilderness of America. So, but it was a really great book and I really enjoyed it. It was 5 stars. I don't remember if I said that or not. The next one I read, also while I was in PEI, was Volume 1 of Saga, and I thought that this one was a lot of fun. It was different. It was much more not safe for work. There is what the art looks like. This one is also written by Brian K. Vaughan and illustrated by Fiona Staples, and it's definitely a favorite of a lot of people, and I see why, and I did enjoy it. I rated it 4 out of 5 stars. It just wasn't as great as I was expecting, but I still really liked it, so it was good. It talks a lot about revolution, and it talks about interracial relationships, only it's different species in this book. And it starts off with a birth, so that was lots of fun. But yeah, definitely check this out if you're into graphic novels. It was a lot of fun and I really enjoyed it. The last graphic novel I read in August, we're getting to the end, was Paper Girls Volume 3. So this was my favorite so far in the series. I thought it was absolutely fantastic. It deals with some more character development, which I thought was really nice. And again, you find out more about what the grander arc is in the book. I rated it 5 stars. I am a little sad because it means that I'm caught up with this one now, so I'm going to have to wait until they publish the next one, which I don't know when that is, so it could be a very long wait, and that's going to be very difficult. But that was everything I read in August. So much. So much. So, this was all the graphic novels. So pretty. Such a tall stack. And then, this was all of the other books that I read. So I'm pretty proud of myself. I kept on saying to myself every month when I make these videos that I cannot top myself, that I have done so much reading this month, there's no way I could read more. And then the next month, I read more. So obviously there is a place where this stops, and I feel like this is probably it. But we'll see. So I hope you had a good August. Let me know about what you read, or if you've read any of these books down in the comment section below. I'd love to hear about what you read. But we'll see you in the next one if not. And be excited for my haul.